What failed, what needs improving, what stood out, and what are my regrets with the Troopy. We've just returned from a grueling 2-week remote trip in the southeastern part of Western Australia. One of my favourite places. And I've been to this area so many times before. It really tests out vehicles and it also tests the individual. I've driven the 79 on this trip 6 times before and the Hilux once. And that's why I can directly and accurately compare how this Troopy went on that trip. It did expose some regrets. It also exposed a lot of things that really stood out to my surprise, and something also failed. I gotta say, I've been very lucky to get so many things spot on to my needs. However, there are a couple of things that just aren't quite there. The main regret I have, and if I could go back in time, I would definitely do this different, but I'm gonna live with it, the solar. I only have 100 watts of solar on the roof. Now, I honestly thought it would be enough, but running 2 fridges, it's not enough. If I had a bigger battery, it probably wouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, if I park up for a base camp, that's fine because I can use a solar blanket, right? But the problem is if I leave it in the driveway for a couple of days, the battery drains down to about 50%. I've had one occasion where it was down to 35%. That's too low. To be honest, if I could go back, I would either get a bigger battery or I'll get a bigger battery and more solar on the roof. I reckon I need to go closer to 180 watts or 200 watts because I have 2 fridges. Now the 79 setup, I only have 150 watts on the roof. However, that is that is enough because I've only got 1 fridge in that vehicle. 2 in this one. Even a small fridge, it draws as much as a big fridge. I need to add some Rock 20s somewhere on the vehicle just to throw some light to the sides, only for when I'm driving at night. They're just not enough light when you're out in the tracks. That said, the Rock 9s at camp are absolutely spot on. They don't throw out too much light and definitely not too little to set up swags and things like that. Okay, that was a very minor regret. Time for a coffee, and then we'll talk about the standout points. Many surprises, actually. At Standout Points, Cafe Ragnarok has been epic. This table, even more epic, comes with a full drop-down sink, which I've honestly only used once because we don't create a lot of dishes. So this is a dish rack. Put your dishes there, they dry. Very clever, thought out design. This is Mission 4x4 again, same as this whole piece up here. Now the way I've laid this out is it's just perfect, the way everything works out, the coffee and the charge points with everything. One of the biggest standout points, the power system. It's working better than I actually expected it to. I thought it was a bit of a gimmick, but honestly, it just made all the wiring easier. Now take this with a grain of salt because I've only had this for like 2-3 months, so I can't talk about it as if I've had it for like 2 or 3 years, but I'm expecting it to last way longer than that anyway. It just made everything so much easier. I used to be against those TVMS screens and look for, like my other vehicle, it doesn't suit that type of vehicle, but for something like the Troopy, it's kind of almost like a caravan on the inside to a degree, or maybe more like a camper trailer on the inside with a rooftop. So that just makes sense. I've still got 1 input left to go, which is for the travel buddy or a travel oven. Not sure which one to go for yet. I want to have to work out which one's the biggest one. Yeah, I highly recommend that system. 350 watt inverter. Is that enough? Yes, it is. Surprisingly, and surprised myself as well, the amount of camera gear we've charged, the amount of time this UHF spends here, 2 laptops charging, even a coffee grinder, that is enough. Look, I'm not making coffees with a coffee machine. Sure, you need a bigger inverter then, but just to think, I nearly put in a 1500 watt inverter and I changed my mind last second to put this in, and I'm not looking back.
unless you want to make coffees, that's all you need.
The tuning, to my surprise, stood out. It was enough power to climb the giant Bill Bunya dunes, yet soft enough for the rock and roll terrain. You know, rocks and stuff. With the tune on the Troopy, it's holding pretty good at 300 to 350 EGT, whereas before a tune and before an intercooler, you'd be sitting at about 400, 450. If you're towing, about 500, 550. You don't want to be sitting at that for too long. My scan gauge saying load on demand, that's sitting at about 50 to 60, so it means I am giving the vehicle a bit of foot to get through all this. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it's running. This tune is pretty good for a long beach run too. Consistently on about 15 PSI, humming quite nice. Troopy loves it. The Troopy handling and driving is so freaking epic. In the 79's defense, it's set up for carrying loads and also towing. When empty, it bucks around a lot. Just to clarify, I said bucks around. B-U-C-K, the bucks. So it's a bit unfair to say that the 79 suspension doesn't handle as well as the Troopy. That said, the Troopy's shocks will need to be replaced in the near future, however, especially the tracks and travel I have planned for it. So much more comfortable than the 79, and the wheelbase. I think it's all to do with the wheelbase. Going through like whoop-de-doos and humps and holes and all that, it just absorbs it way, way better. So I've never experienced anything like that in a vehicle before. And here's the thing, the suspension I put on this vehicle here is a quarter of the cost, similar branded stuff as what's on the 79. However, the Troopy just drives and feels so much better. I just think the way it's set up with the spring rate, front and rear, the compression and rebound, which is not adjustable by the way, it's just epic. I will have to change the shocks at some stage. I'm so stoked about how this vehicle drives. I thought that I'd have to do some changes, like major changes to how it handled later and down the track, and the only major change I may look at doing is doing the diff correction, because at the moment I'm running offset rims and that's a bit of a no-no, don't tell anyone. That wheelbase of the 79 and everything else I've ever driven, the Hilux and the Ford Courier and other vehicles I've test driven, no wheelbase beats the wheelbase of this. The Troopy wheelbase is such a unique wheelbase. The wheelbase is fan-freaking-tastic. Is the Troopy better in every way compared to the 79? No, it's not. You can't compare the two. It's like comparing an apple to an orange. It's set up to two very different things. This failure, it's going to sound really stupid, and it is. The water pump is intermediate. It doesn't sound stupid actually. I got to the bottom of it. Initially I thought it was an installation issue, but it turns out the guy's done a fantastic job on installing the tank. I believe it's a long ranger tank. I'm pretty sure it is actually, 99% sure. Now the handbrake cable goes through the guts of it, which I may have mentioned before. That's why I didn't want to install that, so I happily paid someone to install it. It's costs a bit to install because, you know, it's very intricate. It takes about 5 hours for a professional, so it would have taken me like 2 days probably. I found out what the problem was. This failed, but it was one of those frustrating fails. It didn't just fail completely, it was intermediate. So it made me question what the problem was. I questioned the installation, I questioned the tank, I questioned the wiring I did. I spent ages trying to work out what it was, because sometimes it'll work, sometimes it wouldn't. Then I thought maybe, well, it's because the tank's empty, but it wasn't empty. So this piece of crap here caused me so much grief. So I've replaced it with a C-flow pump. This is my second one. I'm going to carry that as a spare in case this fails as well. It shouldn't do, because I've had these before and they've been pretty good. But this one's going to be in my shower as well. But just to show you a little bit here, you can see the barb lengths on this are far greater. And the only thing that I wasn't happy with what was used is this kind of hosing here. So that big hose sitting on this little barb just wasn't good enough. This hose is great for caravans and for people who don't off-road, but if you off-road and you want to twisty and bendy stuff around, this isn't the hose to go for. So I went for the silicone hose. Silicone hose, look at that, there's a difference. Silicone hose from the tap all the way back, and then I joined it into the other hose right where the tank is, because I didn't want to mess about with that. Now it works bloody awesome. This has a similar liters per minute as the previous one. However, this pumps the pressure in there,
and it was able to pull water from an almost empty tank as opposed to what the other one could do. So I'm very happy with how it all works now. Fingers crossed it stays like that. Guys, if you're doing any kind of installation like that, water-wise on yours, use silicone hose. You can't go wrong. All right, so that was my fail and that was my solution.
These mirrors on the vehicle absolutely suck. They are so small. You can either see your wheels or you can see the side of the Troopy, the side of the body. The problem is, you're looking in the mirror, it's all clear. All of a sudden, a car will just pop up out of nowhere or a tree will pop up out of nowhere because you can't actually see it because it's outside the range of the mirror. However, when you get past it, it is so close to you. You get so close to things, it actually scares the crap out of me. The other issue I have is I don't have electric windows, so I can't just wind down that window on that side and adjust the mirror. Oh man, I'm telling you, these bloody mirrors, not having electric windows. I think we'll change these at the Sydney show. That's better. All right, we're ready. Yes, I'm finally going to cave in and upgrade the mirrors. I did toy about some 79 mirrors, but I'm not going to do that. If I'm going to put something new on here and I've got to drill 2 more holes, I might as well put a decent mirror on it. So likely the MSA mirrors, because they don't look too Dumbo-ish. I don't want these big Dumbo ears hanging off the vehicle, because at the end of the day, to me, the looks of the vehicle does matter as well. I'm looking pretty tight, and that's because we were here till last night about 10 o'clock installing this 180 litre tank underneath. We didn't film a lot of it because it was a pain in the ass to install. I'm glad I did it though. Well, I'm glad we did it, because I wouldn't trust an accessory store to get that tank in, because not very big tolerances. You had to get everything in the right spot so it wouldn't rub anywhere. So I'm glad it's in there. Lots of scenes missing. Tank is up. That was not an easy job. So that brings me an extra 450 kilometer range, which means my safe range being 1,350 kilometers. Do I need that much? Well, yeah, I will eventually, but I don't need it right now, but I'm used to driving with 295 litres, which is in the 79, so when I plan trips, it's much easier just to have the same thought process. 270 litres total, 1,350 safe range. I don't burn 20 litres per 100, I burn less than that. However, that's why it's a safe range. I work on that, so if I go off-road, 20 litres per 100 covers me pretty much everywhere. Now, as you're watching this, I'll be at the Sydney show, Full Drive Adventure show, and by that stage, I'll know the exact figures that I burn across, because I'm gonna work it out down to the litre, down to the dollar. All right, on that note, I've got to depart. I've got to throw all this stuff in and get out of here. What's the time? Oh, see ya.